Welcome back to The Short Game, a show about short video games, games that respect your time. I'm Reagan Kelly, and I'm joined by all my awesome co-hosts this week. First off, Shane Kelly, my bro host. How are you doing, Shane?
Pretty good.
And Laura Nash.
I'm doing excellent.
How was your flight back? Laura was in San Jose, hanging out with me, playing pinball.
I was, and I played most of these games except one that works very, very badly on a flight, which I will talk about.
Oh, yeah. And Nate Heininger. How are you doing, Nate?
Glad to be here. One of my favorite, what's become a tradition for us. We've been doing this so long that we now have traditions. I'm so excited to talk about the Apple Design Awards.
Yeah, me too. And this week this time we have a guest on. This is weird in that it's the second episode in a row where we've had a guest on this show where we so rarely have guests.
Because we have so many hosts that mostly they just don't fit.
But it's amazing to be able to have somebody on who has, some expertise that we don't and can fill in our gaps, and I really appreciate that. So welcome to the show, Mark Bramhill.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining us, Mark. So just to briefly introduce Mark is the host of a really excellent podcast called Welcome to Macintosh. I've been listening to it since, I think, probably the second episode. It's a fantastic, incredibly beautifully produced podcast about Macs or Apple generally and the community around the Apple Macintosh, or, developers or Apple users. And, I'm a big Mac nerd and former Apple retail guy. So I, consume those sorts of things voraciously. It's absolutely a fantastic podcast. So thank you so much for joining us, Mark.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, 3 of the 4 of us are former Apple employees, so we all spent some time in the hive mind. So this show it's fun to kind of just have an episode focused on Apple because it's something that we've all obviously spent some time with, but also it tends to highlight some pretty rad games.
That's true.
So it works out for all of us.
We've covered the Apple Design Awards before. Is this our third one?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, this is our third time doing an Apple Design Award games-specific episode.
First time I was a guest.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That was before you were quote-unquote official, Laura.
Yes.
Yeah, we're so official here.
I wasn't a real girl yet.
Before you came in and saved the show. So this is our third one, and I thought this time, rather than jump straight into talking about the games that won the Apple Design Award, we might spend a couple minutes just here at the top talking a little bit about what the Apple Design Awards are, and maybe a little bit of the history, or even just our history of being aware of the Apple Design Awards. I mean, I'm a super long-time Mac user, and I can only guess that the same is true for Mark. Mark, when did you sort of first become aware of the Apple Design Awards as a thing?
Oh, man. I don't know that I could place a specific year so much, but it's definitely something where every year it was something that I would look out, something that I would be excited to see coming out from WWDC, even though I couldn't go myself, then seeing like, oh, this is something that as a user is a really exciting list of kind of what's coming and the best of the best. So that's always just been really exciting.
Absolutely. I've been watching them mainly back in the day. I would watch them for the non-game category because the games category was so much of a dead zone.
Yeah.
But in the last few years, of course, with iOS, it's become a much bigger deal, and now all the apps in both categories are, for the most part, multi-platform on across all of Apple's platforms. So it's pretty neat to be able to check out those productivity tools and things like that as well.
Yeah, as someone who does user experience design, I remember getting really excited when they stopped just giving it to one iPhone app a year.
Yeah.
Because that was a really hard thing when you were trying to learn from the best of the best. And then it would be like, and you just get like Twitterific.
Yeah,
and you're
this
like,
one's
that's great.
cool.
I'm not making a tweet bot app. Like, can you help me at all? And I think now that they're giving out, 10 or so per platform, it's really helping people look at the variety of things available and know that you don't always have to make the same thing. Because, hey, it's great to know that, Flight Control HD is the best thing on an iPad when you first get an iPad, but you're going to want more than a game.
Yeah. I remember I first kind of became aware of the Apple Design Awards when I first upgraded my G4 tower. It was one of the sort of gray graphite G4 towers. I loved that machine so much. And I upgraded it to OS 10. Shane, you and I went out to Micro Center, and I was very excited to get the preview beta of OS 10, right? And I think that was in 2000 or 2001. I don't know exactly.
Yeah,
when that
your memory
was.
is a little off there, Reagan, because it wasn't a beta. That was the full release. It just felt like a beta.
That's so true. But they actually did. You remember they had that like developer preview or something like that you could go out and purchase. It was like a boxed product. I think we did that. And
okay.
And anyway, I remember bringing it home, installing it on that Mac, and then there was absolutely no software for it. And then a few months go by, and the first time I remember actually learning about something from an Apple Design Award was when they gave an Apple Design Award to OmniWeb, which was a revelation because it was a web browser that didn't suck, that would run on OS 10. It was like fireworks going off. And so I've followed the Apple Design Awards pretty closely ever since.
Yeah, because I think it shipped with IE. I think we were still using Internet Explorer.
Yep. Yeah, IE was the built-in one of the day back then. That was a dark time.
Yeah.
I currently work, in tech support, not for Apple, but when someone is still using IE now, we're like, hey, you think you can download something different? It'll make your life better, not just for our product, but just for yourself moving forward.
God, try working in medicine or medical software.
Yeah, that's really nice that you're able to give people such fundamental life advice when they call up.
Well, for me, the Design Awards are always great because there's like 4 or 5 things every year that I'm like, oh yeah, I could have guessed the day it came out that was going to win one. And then there's a couple ones each time that I'm like, somehow I've missed playing. Like last year, I remember I was like, Lara Croft Go did not look like a game for me. And I didn't touch it. It kept getting written up and I kept avoiding it. And when a Design Award, it finally pushed me over the barrier. And I think that's true this year. There's a couple on there that I kind of looked at and was like, oh, that seems like a fun, easy puzzle game. I think I got Splitter Critters for free at a Starbucks. And but I never played it because I was like, that game does not look good in a still shot, for example. And a lot of the Design Awards don't look great until they're in motion. And so I'm really glad every year when we do them because I can kind of find new things that I end up getting kind of obsessed with.
So in kind of preparation for this episode, I was just sort of looking over it occurred to me that I kind of wondered when Apple started doing games in the Apple Design Awards, because they hadn't, I looked over some of the early ones, like when they were giving that award to OmniWeb, and it was not like there wasn't a games category at all until at least 2004. And even then, like there weren't really like games, quote unquote. They had entertainment products.
Ah, yes. 2004, the year Apple started caring about games.
Well, I think when I looked this up, I kind of had to laugh because it so typifies like what the Apple Design Awards really are all about, or at least what they are about for Apple. Apple has always, I think, kind of the Apple Design Awards are where Apple gives awards to and tries to draw attention to things that are using Apple's newest tech, the stuff that they want you to adopt as a developer.
Next year it'll all be AR.
Right,
It'll just be AR kit.
There'll be nothing but ARKit games next year. But like in 2004, the big winner. So there were 2 games that won like entertainment product awards: Unreal Tournament 2004 and Warcraft 3: The Frozen Throne. Undoubtedly both important games. But the one that won above those was Big Bang Chess from Freeverse Software. And
that classic.
I know. And like, why did Big Bang Chess edge out Unreal Tournament 2004? Well, it's because it incorporated 1,000 things that Apple was trying to do at the time. For example, it was using their new implementation of like, I think it was like OpenGL or something like that, whatever the graphics thing was at the time. You could invite people to play over iChat. It used the brand new Bonjour networking that had just come out that year. So it was all new stuff, right? And I think that's, when you look at what wins the Apple Design Awards, it's a great way to kind of look at what Apple wants people to focus on that year. What new technologies they think are hot. What do they want people to be incorporating into their apps and games?
Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, then this year, you said AR, I think it's landscape manipulation. Almost every game had something to do with manipulating the land that things were walking on. So
that's weird. That's a theme, yeah.
We'll see how that hot tech expands in the future.
I think it's metal. I think it's Unity. Like, it's doing stuff that doesn't look like Unity in Unity and using metal. Like, that's my guess.
Yeah.
Because this stuff looks a little more handcrafted, and a lot of the stuff is like kind of like when I used to design Flash games, and people would be like, "Don't make it look flashy," which had that like fake 3D veneer on top. Like, there's stuff in Unity that looked real fake, and I think they're saying like, you can make a really pretty game using our proprietary software.
It's not all Infinity Blade.
It's not all Infinity Blade, although that did win a design award.
Of course. Well, it does. It will end forever. I think every year we're going to see some sort of Infinity Blade, showcase forever.
People gotta kill people.
Forever.
So I'll say that I kind of panicked because I was like, let's do design awards. And then they weren't on the schedule. And we all had a minor consternation.
Yeah.
So,
Mark, do you know anything about... So I wasn't really following Apple News this kind of cycle. Do you know anything about what I read some vague things about there being a kerfuffle this year about the Design Awards. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, it seems like there was a lot of confusion where people who are more in the know than I am were totally in the dark on were they going to happen at all. And so... they were totally omitted from the schedule for WWDC. There wasn't like some big event that they normally do that my understanding is generally is skipped by a lot of people. It's not a massively attended ceremony is my understanding of it. So I can kind of understand why they might change that, but I'm certainly glad that they kept the awards going, even though they switched it to this new, more private celebration.
I think they got a chance to have the developers rub shoulders with the some of the Apple bigwigs at this more private version of the event, which I think is probably a nicer reward for those people. So I think it's probably good for the event as a whole.
One thing that I noticed, and maybe I'm just missing it on the page, was that they didn't have student winners this year.
Yeah,
no student winners.
That was something that I was personally bothered by. Just like. From my understanding, I don't know if this is the first year that it's been changed, but there used to be more in the way of distinct categories. I don't know how much within games, but at least within the others, I recall there being usually like some more division, at least for like best student entry or whatever. Like, whereas it's just apps, games, and no other distinctions. So seems...
I'm certain you're right. Last year, I'm pretty sure there was a student category for games. I remember we looked at one of our games was one of the student ones. So.
Yeah, glancing back over the Wikipedia article that just sort of lists everything. They've had student winners. I mean, as far back as I can scroll on here so far, at least back to 2010. So omitting that is really a bummer, in my opinion, because actually last year we covered all the games that won, and the two student winners were both games, and they were pretty decent. And I think that's like a big deal for somebody who's just getting started to be recognized really in any way. But in something like that, I mean, that probably gave them a huge jump start. Kind of a bummer for Apple not to do that. I'm sure they have reasons, but it's kind of a bummer.
Just seemed a little weird the year that they spent the beginning of their keynote patting themselves on the back for having really, really young developers and really, really old developers not to give student awards.
Mm-hmm.
Just throwing that out there.
Come on, Apple.
Well, if you're interested in student developers in the indie scene, listen to our last episode about Ludum Dare, which was all about the game jam scene, which is about as indie as you can get. So it's definitely out there still. It's a bummer for Apple not to acknowledge it as much.
Yeah. Well, I guess let's move on to talking about the games that Apple did acknowledge with awards this year. Apple doesn't seem to have like a set number of games at least that they acknowledge every year, or at least they haven't in a while. And they don't really seem to have explicit categories anymore, apart from seeming to sort of divide it up between apps and games. But this year they recognized 5 games. And by coincidence, 2 of them are ones that we've already covered on this show. So we won't be spending a huge amount of time, but we will start by just sort of briefly talking about the 2 games that won Apple Design Awards this year that we've already covered in one form or other. And those, so starting with those 2, those are Severed and Mushroom 11.
Yeah, and both of those we actually covered in kind of as ports. So Mushroom 11 we covered when it was on PC, and I'm going to let Nate and Shane talk about this one, since Reagan and I were solo on that podcast and talked for quite a bit about how cool that game is.
Yeah, well, I mean, I only really kind of brushed the surface on that game, but it was a totally unique take on the kind of physics-based platformer, where you are a fungus that is growing all over stuff, and rather than moving by just sort of directing your character, you touch to sort of kill off bits of your weird mushroom guy, and he just sort of grows in whatever direction that you're not killing. It's hard to explain, but when you try it, especially on a touchscreen device, it's going to make sense right away, and it's going to be a really weirdly fun and extremely atmospheric experience. I really dig it.
Yeah, the thing that stood out to me a lot when I first played it was that this would be perfect on iPad.
Yeah.
And it was perfect on iPad. It won an Apple Design Award on iPad, and it's a great game.
It's kind of insane to me that 2 of the games that won Apple Design Awards are ports from other platforms, which is really unusual. Mushroom 11 is sort of like, it's the perfect port for iPhone and iPad. Like it playing it on a computer, it just seemed like, wow, this needs to be on a touchscreen platform. Like it's fine with a mouse, and if that's the way that you can play it there. But like, this is it really seems almost as if it was designed touch first. It just took them a year or maybe more to get around to porting it over to what really seems like its native platform.
Yeah, and I cannot really think of another time where I have felt that. Like, I can't think of any game that I've played on, and this is no knock to iOS or anything, but I can't think of any other game that I've like played on my computer with like a full mouse and keyboard and everything, or even a gamepad, where I'm like, this would be better on a touchscreen. And yeah, it's like, it felt like it was designed for that. It just feels more intuitive on a touchscreen.
Well, I have a question about this game, and I know they try to highlight games that are supporting some sort of Apple-specific technology. What kind of technologies were involved here? I think I saw something about 3D touch, but I don't even know how that would work in this game.
I don't have a device. I don't have a device that can use 3D touch.
Yeah, and I haven't played this on iOS. I've only played it on PC. I mean, I can certainly imagine the 3D touch would help, because maybe, for example, you press harder.
If you stab the mushroom harder, it dies faster.
You just die.
But I will say that just being able to multi-touch would make an enormous difference. With the PC version, you have just a single pointer, right? You have a mouse, and so you can only kill parts of your mushroom from one direction at a time. I think if you have that multi-touch ability on the game, then it's going to be actually a lot easier. There's some parts of the game where I was just really frustrated that it didn't sort of let me multi-touch, so to speak. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think this is probably like one of those examples like some of the games we'll talk about later, like Blackbox, for example, where it's really using like an obvious Apple technology that they're trying to push developers to use. But presumably it does use Metal. According to their product page, it supports Game Center, although like
Game Center.
Yeah, but I mean, it's also got localization, and like apparently there's a left-handed mode. I mean, Apple loves it when you throw in extra customization, and honestly, I do too. So I'm not a left-handed person, but if I was honestly, if I was this game would be terrible if you tried to do it on a touchpad and you were right-handed and it was like only in a left-handed view. So like the ability to mirror the interface is actually super important on this game. I don't know how it would work if they didn't.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So it's little things like that I think win you a design award.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a whole episode on this, and we've got a lot of games to talk about. And not a lot of time. So let's hit the other port in this case.
Shane, we have as much time as we want. What we're really worried about is how much time people will continue paying attention.
I mean, thank you for making that distinction.
So if you have all the time in the world, you can listen to a full hour of us talking about both Mushroom 11 and Severed. But to give you the brief rundown on Severed, this is another one where it really felt like it belonged on iOS right from the beginning. Severed, if you're not familiar with it, is originally... So it's by the developers, Drinkbox Studios, that made Guacamelee, which we loved, and also did an episode on probably in the first 6 months the show was running. But Severed was hotly anticipated by us 3 people in the world who own PlayStation Vitas, because it was originally a PlayStation Vita exclusive. And the Vita, for those of you who may not know what it is, and I mean that's probably most people at this point because the Vita was such a spectacular, beautiful failure. The Vita is sort of the evolution of the PSP. It's a touchscreen device that's about the size of one of the bigger iPhones, but with game controls. And so what was really interesting about Severed is that it makes heavy use of the touchscreen for the combat, but you're moving around with the game controls, which sounds like it would be a lot of switching back and forth, but it works great because it's got a special sort of combat mode where you're going to be using just one hand on the D-pad to sort of turn left and right, and you're swiping on screen sort of Infinity Blade style to fight these various demons. It's got a really, really cool art style that sort of evokes I don't know. I mean, it's kind of
it's like a cross between Dia de los Muertos or a Mayan inspired something,
and neon, and dipped in neon.
Yeah, and synthwave color explosion.
It shouldn't work as well as it does, but it's amazingly fun. It's a
and we
dungeon
talked about
crawling.
it for an hour,
Yes.
so you're
Whole hour on that one. Moving on.
Yeah.
But I just have to say, this game, if we had done it earlier, it would have probably shown up in my 2016 Game of the Year sort of thing. I loved this game. It got in my head way more than I expected, and it is I think it takes about 8 hours to complete. That is the longest game I've ever completed on an iPhone, and sat down and played. I for one session, I think I played 3.5 hours of this game on my iPhone, and I have never played a game on my phone for more than 20 minutes before I'm like, oh, this is Twitter. Let's see what Twitter's doing, So
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah, this was on our short list for Game of the Year when the last time we did a Game of the Year roundup. And it ended up in sort of 5th place, but only because there were just so many amazing games that year. But Severed...
And not all of us had played Severed.
That's true. It really would... I think I had it number 2 on my personal list of last year. So it's a fantastic game. I played it through on the Vita immediately. When it came out on iOS, I downloaded it and played through it. Not entirely. I didn't finish it a second time, but I played through it about halfway through all over again right after finishing it on the Vita. So it's fantastic. Anyway, moving along. If you want to hear more about Severed, we did a whole episode on it. Sorry for talking your ear off about it if you've already heard that episode.
Well, I am excited to hear about Blackbox because this one comes with a bit of a funny story to it. So, Laura, you were comparing it to Go to 100 or what? Up to 100?
Progress
what was it
to 100.
Progress to 100, which is a game I have played, and so this is a game where you are, I'm guessing, just sort of solving a series of puzzles. Is that right? But the developer of this has a very interesting story. I want to bring that up before we talk about the game because I just think this is such a funny story. When 3D Touch was first brought out, the developer of this, Ryan McLeod, put an app in for App Store review that used the 3D Touch pressure sensor and some weight calibration by putting coins on your screen to turn your iPhone into a digital scale. And that was roundly rejected from the App Store because they decided that you should not be using your iPhone to like weigh things in your kitchen, or maybe drugs or whatever.
I love the
Drugs.
idea of someone
It's drugs.
measuring coke on their phone.
Yeah, which
It's
is my favorite App Store rejection since the game that was rejected because it used the accelerometer to tell how high you threw the phone. But that fabulous developer is back, and what has he brought us this time?
He has once again tried to stretch the limitations of the iPhone, but not in quite such an illegal way.
It's something where I remember like when the iPhone was first coming out, the App Store first launched, there was lots of talk about like the games that were being made for it. There were a lot that really were uniquely suited for multi-touch, and there's still lots of games like that. As you were saying with Mushroom 11, then adding multi-touch to it really adds a new dimension to it or whatever. Like that is something which has been like a really big deal for games, and taking advantage of the hardware that iPhones and iPads have to offer. This feels like the logical conclusion of that sort of taking advantage of Apple's hardware. Like it is every single thing that is available on the phone is being used in this game. Like it is everything in the kitchen sink. Like it's using like the headphone jack, rest in peace. But
Is that why I couldn't get through the game?
Yeah. It uses the headphone control or the volume controls, the mute switch, power buttons, the speaker, the microphone, accelerometer, GPS, altimeter, both cameras, the flash, like every single thing.
Power,
Yeah.
voltage.
Yeah,
It's
like
kind of insane.
Can you give some? So I have, unfortunately, this is the only game that I have not had a chance to pick up for this, and it sounds like it may be the most interesting of all of them. Can you give some examples of like how it is specifically using like,
I'll
the
say
controls on your
everything
headphone?
we say is technically a spoiler for how to solve a puzzle. So if like you really care about it, just buy the game and skip to the end of the chapter.
Oh, and it
marker.
is free within app purchase. So like maybe
Or just
put
don't
this
buy
on
the game.
pause and go download the game and try like 2 puzzles and then come back and listen, because we're not going to spoil any like major stuff. But yeah,
Like a super early one, you have to change the brightness on your screen to pass the level.
right.
I only keep my brightness at like max high screen. So.
But they won't tell you. Like they'll kind of hint at it in some way. Like there'll be some kind of beam or like you might see like some little lines, and you kind of have to guess what that looks like and be like, oh, that looks kind of like this switch on my phone, and then you hit it and hope that it does. This is the game that I tried to play on an airplane, and there's a part where that you have to do the microphone, and so you need to make it like mid-level loud and quiet, and I just couldn't get it quiet because it was just like, and I hit the hint button because I thought I was doing it wrong, and it was like shh, and I was like, I'm trying, god damn it, I'm trying, and then I tried to
Recycled
play on
air.
the bus,
It's recycled
and I was
air.
like,
There's only
god
so
damn it, the
much.
bus is cold, and then I tried it in my apartment alone, and the air conditioner wasn't quiet enough, and I was like, man, Apple, stop making such sensitive mics. I cannot pass this level to save my life. So I eventually taped the mic to bypass the level.
Nice.
So that's what this game is.
Yeah, every single thing in it is some weird hack like that. And there's tons of different puzzles. When I first started using the game, or like when I first tried playing the game, I was kind of shocked that this would be approved by Apple. Like it feels like it's using things that in such weird, hacky ways that wouldn't be allowed or would be frowned upon. And so in a lot of ways, I was kind of surprised to see this win an ADA, just because it's really like stretching the limits of things in ways that are totally not intuitive or user discoverable in a way that's obvious, which that's the whole game. Like that's it's a whole game built around making things non-obvious and using hardware in unintended ways, and just it's something which I found to be kind of exciting that Apple would embrace such non-standard uses of its devices.
yeah, it made me think a little bit about like we're only 3 years or even maybe 2 years back when I think it was more like 3 or 4, when Apple was rejecting camera apps that would let you click the volume button in order to take a photo, because that button is to be used only for volume, and if you're using it for anything else in your app, that's breaking the contract of the App Store. And then a couple of years after that, they include that feature in their own app, and then here we are a couple of years after that, and that button is becoming a part of a puzzle game. I think maybe Apple is using this approval to signal a sort of change in policy without having to explicitly change. They always do that. They always kind of have like the App Store approval process is vague and non-specific, and you learn about what Apple likes and doesn't like by what it rejects and what it accepts. So maybe this is just Apple saying, "Hey, we're okay with you doing these kinds of hacky things now."
Yeah, like Supreme Court test cases. It's with App Store approvals and rejections.
Maybe he ought to resubmit his drug scale app again. Maybe it's time.
I think the time is
the world
come.
is ready.
Honestly, I wonder if there's a puzzle in this. I haven't gotten to one yet. I wonder if there's a puzzle in this game where you have to place a penny on your screen and it weighs it or something. Like, I wonder if that's in here. He's obviously got the tech all ready to go.
How many times do you think he had to submit this?
Oh, I wonder. It looks, though, it really the comparison to Progress to 100, which
it's exactly like Progress to 100.
It's almost exactly like it. And I will share my favorite puzzle from that. The thing that had me banging my head against the wall was one where I can't remember what it said on screen. Something like hello. And the solution to the puzzle was to have the game open and receive a phone call, which was one of the most ingenious uses of this I've ever seen.
The difference between this is Progress to 100 actually gives you text clues, and this one just kind of shows you some random images and hopes animations and hopes you figure it out. So it's actually less accessible than Progress to 100.
So
if you could imagine that chain.
I'll take a second and just sort of be the downer here, which is to say, like, I think that this is an interesting piece of software, but I don't think it's a good game. Now, I'm on record as being the kind of puzzle game hater among us, and Laura, you're the puzzle game master, and so I would be willing to bet you had a different experience playing this than I did, but I did not like playing it, and I did not find it to be particularly fun or interesting.
I find games frustrating that you can solve, but you can't solve them. So I very much enjoyed the puzzles, but unlike Progress to 100, where we keep comparing to this game that no one's played, but it's a similar style. But this one, basically, again, the fact that I could solve several of the puzzles, but I couldn't drain my battery down to 0, or I couldn't or my phone needed to be in low battery mode because I only had 18%, or I was in a crowded area, and it becomes hard when you know what to do and you can't progress.
Yeah, I can say my iPhone has the issue with its battery where once it gets to 7%, it just shuts off. So getting it down to the bottom is not something that's solvable on my phone. So that's just one that has gone unchecked. There are others.
You know how to solve it. That's the thing.
Yeah, I know how to solve it.
You can't pause the puzzle.
Yeah, and then there's one where I think it's based on traveling different distances between opening the app. And it's one where it's just there's only you can't solve that without going some really long distance of I don't know how many miles it is exactly, but I've not done that in the times that I've remembered to actually use it. So it's just it's something that it's nice that it doesn't require you to solve them linearly for sure, but it's frustrating that once you have figured out the solution that you can't actually check it off. It's then it just becomes I guess I have to go drive 100 miles or whatever. That's a frustrating thing to realize that if you're like me and that sort of thing starts to bug you, then that's very difficult to deal with.
Yeah.
It's not a puzzle. It's just, hey, do
it's
this
just
thing.
Houston traffic.
Yeah. God, shoot me. Pay 99 cents to skip the puzzle that involves you sitting in Houston traffic. That was actually one other thing that kind of bugged me about the game. And I mean, I understand this is a reality of the App Store, but this was the only game on the list this year that is free with in-app purchase. It doesn't have the most abusive free with in-app purchase model or anything. There's no, I mean, there probably are timer puzzles in here. I assume, because there's every type of puzzle in here, but it wasn't like, buy gems, etc. But it does have a pay coins that you have to buy with real money to unlock hints. So if you are the sort of completionist who wants to 100% this game, and you don't like, and you are the sort of person who also doesn't mind receiving hints, because it only gives you hints if you pay coins. You have to actually purchase those coins with real money. I just, something about that rubbed me the wrong way. I would rather have paid $2 or $5 or something for a game than to have a game ask me for money midway through. It just bothers me.
Mm-hmm. As an obsessive completionist with money to burn, I love it.
I think I agree. I like the model of just you pay a flat price and you get the whole game. But
that's why we're old.
Yeah.
But it's the reality of the
modern
App Store.
games are not like this.
Yeah.
No, I think it can be frustrating if it's not presented well.
I do like, though, that for a puzzle game where it's, I think, like, maybe it's probably about half of the puzzles are available for free for anyone to play.
Mm-hmm.
And then what most people will end up spending money on, rather than hints, would be unlocking the last of the puzzles. Mm-hmm. Where I know, personally, I really like puzzle games, and this was something where, even though there were things where it's like, there are the frustrations of, I know the answer to this, I know the solution, but I can't solve it. I still found it fun and wanted to keep playing. And so I downloaded it on a whim back when it came out, and just quickly found that it's like, okay, this is great. I totally want to spend more money to extend this further. So I think it's good that you can have the full game for essentially like $4 or $5 or something for all the different packs. But then the hint sort of thing, I think even that there's a finite number of puzzles, and each one of those has, I think, is it 1 or 3 hints for it's.
I'm not sure.
I forget how many hints. I think it might just be 1 per puzzle.
I only ever used 1 per puzzle.
I think then some of the screens have multiple puzzles on them. So it's been a little while since I played it. So
yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, don't get me wrong. I paid $10 for Mario Run, so I don't have a problem with paying more for a game. It's the amount of time and development that goes into them. To me, it's the approach. And like Mario Run, I liked it because they were like, hey, we're telling you right up front, here, these maps are for free. If you want to keep playing, it's going to cost this amount. And I was able to play those things for free, and I was like, sure, $10, I will pay $10 for Mario. It's normally $60 for Mario, so I'll pay it. So that approach is cool for me, and I'm fine paying for games. I just want you to be, upfront about the costs.
So I think part of the reason that this didn't quite work for me is that, like, while I really do like things that play with, your iPhone in a novel and interesting way by using sensors and using, location and other things like that. I like that, but I need something a little bit more to hang that interest on. So I remember for a while, for example, we did Device 6 on the show. You remember ages back. I don't remember what episode that would have been, but we talked about Device 6, another game I think that won an Apple Design Award.
Yes, I think that's correct.
And
their other game, Leap Year, same.
Yeah, from
is that right?
From
not Leap Year.
No,
Leap
Year was different. You're thinking of
Beat Sneak Bandit?
Year Walk.
Yeah, I knew
from
it had
Simogo.
a year in it. Yep.
So they similarly played with your device, trying to sort of remind you of the device that you're holding in your hand and sort of breaking the fourth wall or whatever the equivalent is when it comes to screens. And that was really effective, but for me, it was effective because it had a story that it was hanging that stuff on. It kind of merged those puzzle mechanics with something a little more to draw you from puzzle to puzzle. I think there's definitely going to be a lot of people for whom this is going to be absolutely perfect because it's, each puzzle is so self-contained. And if it doesn't make sense to you immediately, you can skip on and do another one in any order, which something with a narrative can't really easily do. But for me at least, the total abstract nature of this, the sort of frustration that I had with some of the puzzles. I'm not a puzzle guy, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. It didn't quite work for me. But I totally see this as a very polished app. And if you are the kind of person who likes these sort of minimalist puzzles that do clever and interesting things on your iPhone, this is very clever and interesting. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, we'll just try it. It's free.
So the next game we want to talk about is Splitter Critters, which was delightful and a game that I was immediately into.
This one's from the people that made Dark Echo, which is that game where it's sort of like you're using echolocation to explore around and it's run from some sort of monster, but you're blind. That was a pretty neat game.
Yeah, and this is unlike that at all. It is, it's very cute. The best thing I could think of is it's kind of like Lemmings in that you have a little group of things that you're trying to get from one point in the map to another. But
Lemmings was actually one of my favorite games on my first
Me
Mac.
too, actually. Just the other day I was trying to see if there's like a modern Lemmings game out there, and I couldn't really find anything. But this game actually gave me some vibes of Lemmings. You have a set of little creatures that auto walk left to right on the map, and it is your goal to get them from where they started into a spaceship. And unlike Lemmings, they don't actually have any individual skills. You're not applying skills to them.
They're very dumb.
Yeah, they're very dumb. They just walk left or right. Some of them may be able to jump. Some of them might be able to tackle enemies. But for the most part, they're just walking, till they hit a wall and they turn around. And instead of, like Lemmings, assigning skills to the individual creatures, you're using your finger to cut a slice in the landscape and readjust the land to allow their path to walk them, to the spaceship that they're trying to get to. So sort of like Monument Valley or Old Man's Journey, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You're kind of messing with perspective here. So, a really simple one would be you have these guys and there's a ledge, that's 3 or 4 times taller than them in front of them. You would use your finger and cut a slice between where the ledge ends and the land that they're walking on, and then you can use your finger to drag one half of the slice down to where the ledge now lines up perfectly with their path, and now they're walking on the ledge, and you can actually undo that slice and it takes it right back to the land as it was before. And that's a really simple version of it, because you can have up to 3 slices at a time, all independently moving, and you're basically trying to get these guys to their spaceship. And it's interesting. It's very cute. The sound is great, and to me it was just the right amount of difficulty for a casual puzzle game. Nothing is too difficult, but at the same time, nothing. It's not often like super easy. It has a great scale to it.
Yeah, I think the puzzles here are like, first off, it's a very short game. Like, I played it, I didn't complete it, but I'm pretty sure I played 2/3 of it in about an hour. The puzzles are fast, so no one of them takes very long to complete. This is sort of my speed of puzzle game, puzzle games for babies like Reagan. And it's super fun and super cute. And I have to say that the, like, ripping and sliding the landscape mechanic is, like, it's absolutely unlike anything that I've ever seen before, and it's extremely well executed. Like, everything just works as naturally as you would expect that it should. When you tear the landscape in half and kind of slide it along that tear, everything just interacts in a very natural way. If you bring one ledge closer to another ledge, then your little animal alien splitter critters will be able to jump straight from one to the other in a very natural way. I didn't run into any kind of like weird. It's the sort of thing where you'd expect there would be the possibility of like weird physics problems or weird little moments where things get caught up on corners or edges, but that never really seemed to happen. It's just
if you do weird physics, it's super memorable, though.
Yeah, it's a game that I'm pretty sure there's 100 different solutions to some of the trickier puzzles, because I guarantee some of my solutions were not the most effective way to do it. I'd have like 3 cuts where I end up having these guys out on this like weird little floating island of land that I trapped them on to be able to hold them there to get them to a different platform, and it's like there was probably a 3-cut move I could have done. Which actually makes me, when I was playing, part of me wishes it had a par system, to say like,
Oh yeah,
it doesn't have scoring as far as I can tell.
yeah, like this could be done in 4 slices. Can you do it? I would have really enjoyed that as like the gamer in me, but for the like casual gamer in me, I loved that it didn't exist, because there's no punishing of. If you have to slice it 10 or 15 times to figure it out, it's fine. You'll get there. It's not too difficult, but sometimes it can be a little confusing.
It's so polished. I think it's the sort of thing where you're probably going to see this add more levels or something in the future and maybe do some in-app purchases or something, because it's so polished, but it is such a very short experience. And I don't usually say that as a bad thing. I mean, I think it's nice to be able to
that is the concept of our show.
Precisely.
I know.
But like it is I think it's certainly under 100 levels. I think it's like 50 or 60, something like that. And
I'm currently at like 48, and it took me about an hour and a half to get to those 48.
Yeah, each individual level might take, I mean, some of the more complicated ones I'm sure get to be a little bit more difficult, but I never took more than about a minute or two on any one level.
Yeah.
It's super delightful, and I think that, I hope it does the Badlands model where they just release world after world after world. I mean, it's already kind of made in a way that you can go from planet to planet, so it's kind of designed in a way that you can tack on more stuff later. But there was a quote that I read when I was doing a little bit of reading for the show that when it came out at PAX, the conversation around it was like, oh, this game's going to fail miserably or it's going to win a design award. And I'm so glad it won the design award, because it's really, I never would have seen it otherwise. I mean, as I said, it has the look of something that could go either way. It could be just another puzzle game that's shovelware, or it could be a fantastic game. It's hard to tell when a good art style is in there, like if it's a game for children, or game is for kind of all ages, and probably one of the only ones here that are all ages.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it just also involves like little circular creatures, but it felt to me kind of like the Leo's Fortune of this year.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just like a really crisp, good use of the mechanics. It works perfectly on a touchscreen. It's fun. It's not too intimidating. I think it hits what you guys were talking about before, that you can make nice looking games on the iPhone that aren't necessarily like 3D render. Like this is just a pretty, unique designed game, and I think it stood out to me, more than some of the other games that we've done. Even as much as I love Severed, and as much as I like Old Man's Journey, like this has that simplicity that you need, I think, to really make a truly accessible iPhone game.
So the last game on the Apple Design Awards list this year was Old Man's Journey, and that's the only one on the list here that I haven't played at all. But it also seems to be the one that most people were talking about when I saw people reacting to the Apple Design Awards on Twitter. Who's had a chance to kind of dig into Old Man's Journey a little bit?
I have.
Oh, what a great game.
We both, yeah. I mean, there's a reason both were like, we've talked about it. If it didn't win a design award, I was going to make everyone cover it anyway. So I'm glad it won a design award. Old Man's Journey is a game that when I looked at the art, I was like, oh, they've made a game for me. I love animation concept art. I dragged Reagan to the Walt Disney Museum and made him like go see a special exhibition of a guy who's just does background painting. And then I opened this app and was like, it's my Pixar movie on the phone.
That was
wonderful.
great, by the way. Thank you for dragging me to that, Laura. It was awesome.
Shout out to Eov and Earl. But the Old Man's Journey game is a kind of wordless, beautiful art style game that tells a beautiful story. It's very light on the game. I mean, it's landscape manipulation again, but it's really light and lovely.
I'd like to say that I'm always looking at games on these lists through the kind of what does Apple love about this lens, and it's not apart from just being a gorgeous game, it wasn't super obvious to me right away. I mean, I guess it's under the hood, probably using their Metal APIs and stuff very well, but it's not like using Game Center or anything like that. It's a very simple, quiet game of the sort that we really have tended to enjoy on this show. These sort of games that have quiet, tender moments that, you know, where your character sits on a hillside for a while. I'm reminded of Brothers: A Tale of Two Sons.
We are a very tender podcast.
We love whenever a character sits on a bed and listens to music, or sits on a bench and waits for a boat to come.
I'm also increasingly getting old, so I relate. But this game, you mentioned the art style. To me, the art style is reminiscent of these sort of hand-painted travel postcards. Every scene is just a beautiful location that you want to just sort of fall into. And you're navigating through by, once again, moving the terrain a little bit. You can grab a hill or something and drag it up or down, and it keeps it pretty simple. I mean, even throughout. They introduce some things that complicate it, like maybe you have to move some sheep out of the old man's way, or what have you. But the thing that I liked the most about it was how alive all the scenery was. There was lots of things. It reminded me of like a children's busy book, you know, where they have all the little flaps that you can open.
The technical term for that, no joke, is a click and wiggle.
Okay. Yes, and you have made
that
children's apps.
No joke.
So.
The technical terminology for a thing you tap on in the background that animates with a delightful noise or sound effect or animation.
Well,
it's a click that does no effect on the storyline.
This game is packed with click and wiggles.
Oh, they're wonderful.
Laura is bringing that children's app developer knowledge on the short game.
Wait, yeah, was that children's specific, or was that just like video game or like any?
It's the terminology and animation for a thing in the background. I don't know if I don't know if adult games use it, but in
they should.
Like,
I don't know if they have a lot of click and wiggles in Overwatch.
Yeah,
I would argue probably a lot of. What is it when something is just destructible for no purpose? That feels like a click and wiggle.
Shoot and wiggle.
Yeah.
But I was going to say about
catch
this game,
fire.
like the thing that really stood out to me as an Apple-esque thing is the memories that you unlock. They have that same feel of those Apple Live photos to me. There's this sort of movement and depth that's added to these otherwise static images. And it's through that a lot of the story of the game is told. And I don't really want to spoil anything for anybody, because that's, I think, half the reason to play this game is this story in which this old man at the start of the game receives this letter at his home that, you know, concerns him greatly, and he sets off walking to visit someone or do something, and along the way
he just gets a letter and leaves.
He's reliving his memories of his past. So I this one has my wholehearted recommendation, with no caveats at all. I think almost anyone, you could put this game in front of them and they'll enjoy it.
Awesome.
It's peaceful. Like, I played this before bed. I played it when I wanted to wind down. The memories are actually done by a different artist from the main app that's working the same style, so they're a little bit richer. They feel a little different, which works beautifully. You can see that they don't mind being silly, but they also are kind of in the game of doing something that's a little more heartfelt.
So before we wrap up, I thought just glancing at it, I thought it might be worthwhile if anybody has any experience with any of the non-game apps that won Apple Design Awards this year. There was a time where I spent a lot of effort and time like checking out every single thing that would win an Apple Design Award, whether it seemed like it was marketed towards me or not. And this year, I think, is the first year that I have used 0 of the things on the list, which makes me feel a bit out of touch.
Mark, I think you have tried out Bear. Is that right? I saw you tweeting about it a little bit.
Yeah. So Bear, I actually am looking at that now. I really like it. It's ultimately, I'll say, not the right note app for me. Notes.app has just gotten so good over the years that
Respect.
it's a really high bar. Now, I will say if you are like a programmer or developer or you work in Markdown, then some of like the syntax highlighting or just the fact that it can do Markdown support and really nice exports, it is really nice. And it's beautifully designed. It's slick and feels faster than the Apple Notes app. So I would say like there's a lot of things that I find really attractive about it and are really enticing. The biggest thing that, for me at least, and I think for a lot of users, would be the tagging feature where with like a hashtag and sub tags, you can organize things where you can have something that's in multiple sorted into multiple areas rather than just having sorted into folders, which is not really how most of my notes work. They're usually applicable to some number of things. So it's definitely something where, as bad as I feel, I would not mind Apple stealing that feature for their Notes app.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But no, it's something where for people who it makes sense for, I think it's a fantastic app and they really did a great job with it. But just it's not. It's one of those things where enough people need Notes apps that it's a market that can support niche apps like this. But I don't think it's really the thing for everyone.
It is at least nice that they have both an iOS and Mac version, and I've used a few Notes apps that had very good design and very good, just feature set and no syncing or bad syncing. And that's really what's caused me to switch back to the Apple Notes app, is they've really nailed the syncing now. I do all of my show notes in just the Apple Notes app. I can pull up a bunch of tabs for different games and things like that and use the little share extension, add them over to Notes, and then I can just go right back to them later and start putting them into show notes in our CMS. So, but I do write the show notes for this show in Markdown, so maybe I'll try Bear out.
Yeah, it's worth trying. It's free to try, where the syncing is what you pay for. And I will say I'm currently using like a 1-month free trial of that and just sticking with it to see if there's anything that I find invaluable, but I'm probably going to be switching back. But I will say that the syncing engine they have built is rock solid and lightning fast, like faster and works better in the background than the sync for Apple's Notes, which is pretty good, but occasionally I'll find when I really do care about it syncing instantly is the few times that it won't. Mm-hmm. But Bear has been already full thing loaded before I can open the app on whichever respective platform. So I've been really impressed by it. But
anybody else try any of these other apps?
Well, I have not used Things 3, but I have used Things before in their previous versions. So I won't comment on Things 3, which looks great, but I will just say I think I am 100% behind any developer that is bold enough to put this much effort into a to-do list app and to boldly charge $50 up front for such an app.
Wow.
Which is, I think if you can build a healthy business on top of a $50 to-do app, then I am extremely impressed with you.
Hey, man, you only have to sell, what? One in every 15 people have to buy it, and you make as much as if all 15 of those people had actually paid, the $3 that a normal app would cost. So you just got to really hit your market, that niche that you're looking for.
It's funny, I feel totally okay paying $10 for a game on my phone. And I know that's probably unusual because a lot of folks, if it's not freemium, then they're not going to download it.
You just spent about a third of this episode complaining about a free game.
I know. So, but I am saying, like, I don't mind spending money on games, but the idea of spending $50 on a to-do list app does seem a bridge too far for me. But then again, I don't know. It's like, sometimes I'm sure it's professional software for folks who are project managers or something like that. And if that's the case, it's probably completely worth it.
My freelance friends are like all over this app. Like they've all been singing its praises since it came out. So anyone who is kind of trying to do work but also get other people to pay them for it, that's kind of who I see Things 3 for. Like the kind of one-man shop. I mean, honestly, some of these other indie game studios are probably using stuff like this to run the studio.
Yeah, I use OmniFocus for my stuff, but that was at the time that I was paying for the software. That was definitely felt like it was a step ahead of Things. But with Things 3, I could totally see myself if I were looking to buy something now, that might be what I would be looking at. It looks really, really slick. I did look at like some videos about the biggest thing that looked really cool was like their Magic Plus button that they've got floating around.
So good.
Like, doesn't that look awesome?
So it lets you take the add button in the corner and you can actually move it anywhere in the app and it will add new items conditionally based on where you've placed it. So it will change the behavior of the add button depending on where you stick it.
Yeah, like drag and drop essentially, where if you're in like if there is a set of lists, you can drag it and it'll add it to whatever position in like a multi-step project for a new item, rather than just add a new item to my inbox and then you have to sort that and things, where it's like that is kind of an amazing feature and it is super slick in how they implemented it. So I was really
I tried to get my
watching
office to reimburse me for that because I have to build this very lightweight tasks piece into the software I'm doing, and they were like, if you think we're building Things 3, you have got to be kidding.
Dang.
Now,
and they were like, not for your personal account. Sorry, we see you. Good try.
Yeah.
Good try,
and to be fair, I just looked it up. It's $50 for Mac, which feels a little bit better. It's $10 for iPhone and Watch,
okay,
that's
more reasonable.
and then $20 for iPad. So with that being said, I feel a lot better about it. A $50 iPhone app will never feel great, but a $10 iPhone app, again, I paid $10 for Mario Run. I can pay $10 for maybe a really good to-do list. So
yeah.
And quick shout out to Elk, which is a currency converter. And I know that doesn't sound very exciting. It's like a weather app, like who gives an award to the weather app, or a calculator. Like it's kind of seems like my first app, but they've done a really nice
for
job.
my weather app.
Oh, very nice. I mean, I technically paid $3 for mine because I use Dark Sky.
Oh, okay, that's what I have. Maybe it was only $3, but yeah. I'll pay for good design. I'm ready to pay for good design all day. But there's
Elk's got an interesting model. It's free, but if you want to unlock all of the currencies, it's $4. So you can play with it and see if you want to use it beforehand.
I hope someday my life is that. I need to constantly be converting my money. As it stands, I have literally never had to have that problem.
It's got a cool Apple Watch app. Like you can spin it.
I go to Canada sometimes.
Yeah, you go to Canada sometimes and you're like, oh man, that like little bit more expensive dollar just throwing my brain.
Yeah, or they're like, yeah, we'll take your dollars fine. I'm like, sweet. I don't you do you do the conversion.
I've also I use Airmail 3 on Mac and iPhone and iPad. So that one I've been using for like 6 months now. So of all the winners, that's the only one that I use regularly. And I am super impressed by it. It has really good integrations with lots of third-party apps and services. And so being able to share things with my calendar app, with deliveries or things like that, lots of custom extensions there has been super, super helpful. And Apple's supposedly improving search in their mail apps, but I will I will believe it when I see it. Search in airmail is actually good. So that's
Oh my gosh.
That is an endorsement in and of itself. I just pulled out my phone to look for airmail.
Yeah,
So.
sold.
So I'm glad we continued our tradition of talking about the Apple Design Awards. Again, I hope that if folks, check out any of those games, all of them on the list were fun. If you want more details about Severed or about Mushroom 11, I'll have links in the show notes of this episode back to the episodes where we did an entire hour talking about all the cool details and some spoilers from those games. So if you're curious and want to know more, or if you've played them and really enjoyed them, go check those out. And thank you so much for joining us on this episode of The Short Game. You can find our show on the web at www.theshortgame.net, where we have a contact form, and we love to hear from you. If you have a favorite iOS game or something like that you think we should check out for the show, let us know. We play lots of listener suggestions, so we really appreciate getting those suggestions from you. If you like the show...
I'd like to jump in and suggest Card Thief, which was robbed at the ADAs. Oh, Card Thief rules.
Which is why Shane wasn't on more of the discussions about the ADAs, because he was playing Card Thief instead.
Keep it quiet. We might talk about that one on the next show.
Shane was pacing back and forth outside the ADA award ceremony, just screaming. He had a sign, everything about Card Thief.
Where's Card Thief?
It was embarrassing. I wish he wouldn't have worn that Short Game t-shirt when he was doing it. But,
Well, I can't wait to check that one out, Shane. And if you, listener, have a suggestion, let us know on the contact form. But if you just want to support the show, the best way to do that at present is just to leave us a review on iTunes. We really appreciate iTunes reviews. They apparently do make a difference. It's very arcane. iTunes has its own way of doing things, but apparently, if you leave us reviews, positive 5-star reviews on iTunes,
At some point, we get to cash those in for some sort of money prize.
praise and money will just rain down on us from the heavens, we assume. So please do that. And there's a link to that on our website, too. You can also find us on Twitter @_shortgame. You can find me on Twitter @RayganK. That's RayganK. Laura, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter @Laura J. Nash.
And Shane, where can people find you?
Also on Twitter @8bitshane.
And Nate, where can people find you?
you guessed it, Twitter @NateSTL.
And of course, Mark, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Mark, obviously, people can find your podcast, Welcome to Macintosh, on iTunes and wherever podcasts are available, or at macintosh.fm, which is a rad domain name. I don't know how you managed to snag that one. But anything else you want to plug, or where can people find you, Mark?
Twitter is great, @MC Bramhill. So it was a pleasure to be on with you guys. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much. Yeah, and I'll particularly recommend if you want to check out Mark's podcast, which is great. Every episode of it is fun. But and you've got a new season coming pretty soon, right?
Yes. Coming later in August, there will be 10 brand new episodes coming. So get excited about all of those. So starting in August, 10 brand new episodes. I'm super excited about that, especially a series about emoji. So stay tuned.
Oh, that's really exciting.
The emoji compendium or consortium.
Yeah, the Unicode Consortium. Yeah,
I love
Lovely.
that.
Yeah.
I love that they call themselves the consortium. It's just
It does sound a little
this, like,
ominous,
I
right?
imagine this like dark, like league of people who manage our day-to-day emojis. It's emojis.
The shadowy cabal of emoji lords.
Exactly.
Well,
It's
I'm really excited to hear you
fascinating.
say that, because actually my favorite episode of your show, you've had a lot of really great topics, but the most recent one in the feed, if folks are looking at Welcome to Macintosh, was a sort of extra episode in between seasons about EmojiCon, and it's just full of amazing stories. So that was a great episode. If you want a place to start with Welcome to Macintosh, that would be a great place to start.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good.
So thanks again, and join us next week on another episode of The Short Game.